Welcome back. We're going to talk today about unintended consequences. Okay, a consequence is what happens as a result of something, as a result of an action or a comment. Unintended, of course, means something that was not initially meant to be. And frequently in politics, frequently in government, and frequently in law, what happens is that our elected officials pass a law, enact a law, and they think they thought about everything, but they didn't really. And as a result of laws being passed, other things happen that perhaps they didn't intend to. We'll be talking about this throughout the semester, but I want to give you one example now that hopefully will keep you thinking about unintended consequences. So, remember, I've talked to you before about how the study of government means the study of other things like history and politics and money and so forth. Before the 13 British colonies of the 14 or 15 who declared their independence, before they declared their independence, there were a series of actions against the colonies by the King of England and by the British Parliament. And those actions were designed to raise money for what was about to be a bankrupt government in the United Kingdom. Bankrupt because the British had fought the French in the United States and in Europe, but they fought the French in the United States in what we refer to as the French and Indian War. They spent a lot of money. They needed to raise money. And they felt that the colonists needed to come up with most of the money. And so what they did is they placed a series of taxes on the colonists. One of the first taxes that they placed was a tax on molasses. Okay. The colonists were bringing molasses into the colonies. Now, the purpose for bringing the molasses into the colonies was to primarily make rum for consumption, because in those days only Native Americans and poor people drank water, because water could kill you. So most people drank some form of alcohol. And in fact, there were special beers manufactured with low alcohol contents that were designed for the use of children. But so anyway, the British placed a tax on molasses. The colonists were not stupid, and so what they quite simply did is they arranged in places like Puerto Rico and other Caribbean nations to have the molasses converted to sugar so that they could bring the sugar into the colonies in order to manufacture the rum. Well, the British King and the British Parliament were not stupid, and so they placed a tax on sugar. The colonists were not stupid, so they just quite simply started having the sugar converted to rum and started bringing rum into the colonies. And the British started taxing the rum. That's one of the reasons why we had the War for Independence. One of the reasons that the colonies decided to leave Great Britain. And in fact, the largest signature on the Declaration of Independence, John Hancock signed that declaration because he was already a wanted man by the British. In today's dollars, he owed, depending on the economist you talk to, the equivalent of $75 million in taxes, because John Hancock quite simply was smuggling rum into the colonies. So, oh, by the way, a third of the delegates to the Constitutional Congress, where a declaration from Great Britain was declared, were in violation of all the laws relative to the manufacture and distribution of alcohol. George Washington was one of them. they declare their independence. We fight the war. We win the war, and ironically, the first major challenge after the Constitution of the United States is written and ratified, and George Washington becomes the first president of the United States under our current governing document. One of the first challenges to that new government was what was referred to as Shays' Rebellion. They call it Shays' Rebellion in most textbooks in public schools in Texas and other parts of the United States because state school boards don't like to use whiskey as a title. In college textbooks, it's typically referred to as the Whiskey Rebellion. In order to finance the new government, George Washington and Congress placed a tax on alcohol, including whiskey. And there were a group of citizens in the new United States of America who objected to that, and they refused to pay the tax, and they rebelled against the new government, and George Washington had to call out military forces and send them to put down the Whiskey Rebellion. So that's the first major threat, but the government of the United States continues to tax alcohol. And people in the United States continue to manufacture it, and in some instances not pay the tax on it. And so the government of the United States created a series of laws and established law enforcement officials to go out and tax alcohol and make sure that people who weren't paying the tax were punished, and that any alcohol that they manufactured would be thrown out. So people in the mountains of the new United States of America would set up stills to manufacture whiskey, and their type of whiskey typically, historically, was referred to as moonshine. The government would send agents out there to track them down. The moonshiners would put their whiskey in wagons to get it away from their stills and to distribute it. And the revenuers, the taxing agents, would track them down and ride on horses to find them. Well, times changed. And ultimately, we quit using horses. And so the moonshiners would buy early trucks, and they would put the moonshine in the back of the pickup trucks or the back of cars in the trunks in order to distribute the alcohol. The revenuers, the taxing agents, of course keeping up with the times, they would have their own automobiles and they would track these people down. Well, one day in some small town in the mountains in the eastern part of the United States, two illegal moonshiners show up at the same store. And both of them have in the trunks of their cars moonshine. They unload the moonshine, they take it into the store, they get paid, they walk back out to their respective cars. And as people sometimes do, those two moonshiners looked at the respective cars, and one of them looked at the other guy and said, "My car's faster than your car." And the other guy said, "No, it's not. My car is faster than your car." And so they went back and forth for a couple of minutes, arguing about whose car was faster. And of course, how do you decide who has the fastest horse or the fastest car? You have a race. And so these two moonshiners decided to have a race, and they raced their cars. And one won and one lost. And one of the unintended consequences of this tax on alcohol and of these two moonshiners showing up at the same store to sell and unload their moonshine was one of the most highly attended sports in North America, and that is NASCAR. And of course, NASCAR is proud of their beginnings. They talk on their website about the fact that they grew up from moonshiners who were racing their cars around the backwoods of the countryside, smuggling moonshine. Laws have unintended consequences. We'll be spending more time talking about that over the course of the semester. Hey, I hope you're having a great semester. I am. And if you have any questions whatsoever, let me know. Contact me through epcc.edu, my email account, and or through Blackboard. Remember, if you use email, I can only accept and respond to messages sent from your epcc.edu email account. So make sure you use that account and not a Gmail account or a Yahoo account or some other account. The best way to reach me is through Blackboard course messages. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.